And people like me, and above all the Palestinians, I am really nothing. The Palestinians themselves cannot wait anymore for those historical development which will happen by themselves in few decades or not. So here I stand here and try to tell you, and I'm very much looking forward to hear your remarks and questions, and tell you, because there is very little hope that change will come from inside the Israeli society, the role is now on the shoulders of the world, on each of you, on each of us, on governments, on public opinions, not from a place of wanting the best for Israel, at least those of you who care about Israel, and I'm sure in this audience there are people who care about Israel and care that Israel will become a just place, a just state, contradictory to a Jewish state. I don't want to elaborate on this now, but this last require of Benjamin Netanyahu that the Palestinians will recognize us as a Jewish state. I'm not sure, I'm not an expert for Canadian history, but did any of your Prime Minister ever ask the world to recognize Canada as a Canadian state? Also, the Jewish people is a nation. It's not only a religion. And nobody needs the recognition. And this recognition is another way to postpone and to postpone. Remember the times when Israel said there is only one problem to get to peace with the Palestinians. Yasser Arafat. Once we get rid of him, all the problems will be solved. And then we got rid of him one way or the other, and we got Abu Mazen. He's too weak. You don't mean to make peace with someone who is too weak. Arafat was too strong. Abu Mazen was too weak. Then we said, in between, there's only another problem. The Palestinians have to change their amendment. The American president went to Gaza to change the amendment, to witness that they're really changing it. Israel said this is the condition for any kind of progress. Some other times Israel said the only condition is if they stop with the terror. Then we'll get into peace. All those things happened. So we had to invent a new excuse to postpone and to say no. So we found it. Recognize us as a Jewish state. So for people like me, who are a little pessimistic to say the least, who are a little desperate to say the least, who have very little hope to say the least, and maybe it's my psychological problem and has nothing to do with reality, maybe. But to people like me, such an evening, such an audience, such a tour like I have here, such reactions, such enthusiasm to go for a change in the Middle East, not from a place of hating Israel, and not from a place of hatred at all, is a source for a lot of hope. And therefore I'm so grateful for you for coming tonight, for listening to me, and I'm really eager to hear you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Levy. We so much appreciate your boldness and your courage. And just saying it as it is. We're going to get started with the Q&A.
that humanitarian aid that was on those ships, did any of it ever get to Gaza? And my second question is, as somebody said to me yesterday, I teach here studies in propaganda, but somebody was telling me yesterday that there has been a movie, a film made about this flotilla and the attack on it, and in this movie everything has been turned around and it shows the humanitarians attacking the Israelis landing from their helicopters. I have not seen it, but I was just wondering who's in charge of doing these propaganda films. But I really would like to know if some of those humanitarians, are they still in prison? And did the Gazans ever get any of the humanitarian goods? Thank you.
Thank you.
As far as I know, the goods were delivered to Gaza. No one is in prison. And about the film, it was made by the army spokesman, and I have no problem with propaganda films. I have a problem with the Israeli media. Because we were never shown how those 9 Turks were killed. We were never shown why part of them were shot from their backs. We were only shown those parts that the army spokesman had shown. It's my fault, huh? But maybe it's relevant to what they say. Anyhow, they showed what they chose to show. They had, by the way, taken all the material that journalists on the flotilla had. And again, I don't have any problem with the army. I have a problem with the Israeli media, who accepted that they will broadcast only what the army spokesman will let her broadcast, and not even ask or require, show us everything. We want to know the truth from a professional point of view, not from an ideological point of view. There were 9 people killed. You don't see a hint to it in all the films that they were releasing. Yes, please.
Yes, Mr. Levy. I would like to salute you. I'm sure you know what a righteous Gentile is. Yes? You're the son of Holocaust survivors. I would call you a righteous Jew. And if you're the last man standing who is saying what you're saying, I salute you. You are a very, very courageous human being.
Let's try to shorten the embarrassing part.
I can do better, don't worry. I would just like to say that in this country, in Canada, and I've said this before at things like this, Canadians have families divided over the issue of Israel. I'm Jewish, obviously. And when I get into this discussion with my relatives, they become very enraged and angered. And again, you know the term, self-loathing Jew, anti-Semitic. So when people say I'm a self-loathing Jew, I just say to them, no, I'm not a self-loathing Jew, I'm a self-questioning Jew. And the whole history of our people was to question, debate, argue. And now, suddenly, they checked out. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you very much. I also feel the same way that you feel for many, many years. I myself witnessed the changes in the society in Israel being more extreme and non-caring. I see it in my family. And the question is, recently Canadians or Canadian activists trying to organize a boat to go to Gaza. The same thing is also being tried in the US. My question is, all those things with the boats and so on, from, of course, Europe is much more active and so on, do they have effect on the Israeli society or any? What is your take on all these boats trying to go to Gaza, symbolically trying to break the blockade?
First of all, the flotilla was a hell of a success in terms that the next morning or a few weeks later, the Israeli Prime Minister declared that the goods, at least part of the goods, will be allowed into Gaza. This was a direct result out of the flotilla. So on one hand, Israel claims that those flotillas are a catastrophe. On the other hand, they did change something. In the Israeli society, not at all, because again, the description of those flotillas through the filters of the Israeli media is of terrorists who come to attack us. And it's very hard to break this belief that those are terrorists who come to attack us. And therefore, you really can't break this separation wall between the Israeli society and reality. Yes, please.
Yeah. At the time Hamas was elected in the Palestinian elections a number of years ago, I thought there was a wonderful opportunity to talk to the people who were most hostile to Israel, and yet who seemed to me had laid out a possibility of negotiation, and who had at the time, if I remember correctly, enforced a ceasefire. That is, they had enough, which means they had enough discipline, they had enough control over their own people. Now, everybody, Israel, the United States, Canada, I think most of Europe, subsequently demonized Hamas. And I wonder if you could say something about Hamas, what Hamas represents, and what the possibilities would be in the best of all possible worlds of dealing with Hamas.
With a little bit of modesty, or no modesty at all, I want to quote myself. When Hamas won the elections, the next morning I wrote an article which the first sentence was, "Good news from Gaza, Hamas had won." Now, Hamas is not my cup of tea. Any fundamentalistic or religious organization or political group does not talk to me. I'm not sure about the democratic nature about Hamas. The way they treat women, for sure, is not my cup of tea. But I thought, and I still think, that it's worth to challenge them, to try them, to see. Because I truly believe that also in Hamas there are reasonable people who are really willing to bring some progress to their own people. You see, the world told the Palestinians, you have to make democratic elections. We want democracy. Again, another condition of the right-wingers in Israel. As long as they are not democratic, we will not talk to them. It's only about having democratic Palestinians, democratic society, then we'll negotiate with them. So the Palestinians went for elections. They didn't understand that when the West told the Palestinians to go for elections, for democratic elections, he also thought that they should vote what the West want them to vote. Otherwise, it's not democracy. But it happened to be so that the Palestinians voted for the alternative, for the opposition. They were quite sick and tired from the rule of the Hamas, and they vote the only alternative, then Hamas. Fatah seemed to be corrupted, at least partially, didn't bring any progress to the Palestinian people. They voted for the alternative. And then the West say, no, if you voted like this, we boycott you.
Mobile Broadcast News.